the audience is actually a certificate for the way the course is developed. The theme of the day is innovation, entrepreneurship, startups, a new development that we all have to be quite familiar with in the academic domain. So in this context, I have requested Professor Fani, who has tremendous exposure in this domain. So he will moderate the proceedings of the day. We also have a panel discussion in the afternoon, kind of a free format panel discussion. You will see how it shapes up, sort of spontaneous program that has been arranged for. So I request Dr. Fani to conduct the sessions of the day.
Thank you. Hi, welcome back. I will see me again, but because I have this today's innovation and on innovation, and let me share with you that we have one of the largest innovation ecosystems in an academic setting within the Asian region. Let me brag about it a little bit. And the reason, the first speaker of the day will be Professor Karandikar. He is also our director. He is also our alumnus. And being a director by default means that he has a lot of credits in his account in terms of awards, in terms of projects, in terms of papers, in terms of patents. So he has gone there. So I would not bore you with all that, but consider that he is in his own field, which is electrical engineering. He is one of the top people in the country, if not in the world. Okay, so I lead you to look at his CV on the net if you want more detailed thing. But one thing which I am why we would like him to come here and do this for us, and why we have invited him here is because he was one of the few people in the faculty who have actually started their own company and have gone to the first and second stage round of funding by running the company and also sold the company. So essentially, he was in IIT Bombay for the last 22 years. He is also our alumnus. And I believe that a person who had a hands-on experience in terms of leveraging the innovation ecosystem would be the best person to start the day off, because he would understand the nitty-gritties on the heartburns and the pains in building these institutions, and also in terms of engaging with these institutions, in terms of participating in these institutions in a very with a more hands-on way. So without much ado, and I will invite Professor Karandikar to come on stage and then deliver this. Thank you.
Okay, so good morning and thank you, Professor Fani. I think, as I said, we would like to be more interactive, and first I want to put some disclaimer that I'm not an expert neither in innovations nor in managing innovations. And as Professor Fani said that I founded a startup, it was just an accident. And maybe I can share some anecdotal stories on that, and would be really happy to interact on that issue. This is a formal outline, and then we can throw open the floor for discussion. Usually I can speak without mic. I have given lectures in IIT Bombay, never used a mic in my history in the last 22 years. Now, one more disclaimer that since I have been intimately working with the telecom, so I will sort of use a lot of examples from the telecommunications, particularly the wireless communications, just to drive home some of the points, but I think they are largely applicable to automobile sectors and also the pharmaceutical sectors in the country. So this is a brief outline. I'll just sketch a current innovation scenario in the country. What is the global IPR scenario? What is really the role of academia? Some thoughts on managing innovations in academia, which of course we can do that interactively. And I'll recount some of my personal experiences. We have done a lot of things. I mean, I've been personally involved in, as I said, founding a company, founding a national telecom standards development organization and taking it to a global standards body, and now we are in a position we are making effective changes in the 5G era, which India was never there in 2G and 3G, and I'm really feel very glad that I'm intimately involved with that. I was the vice chair of 3GPP, which standardizes the next generation wireless standards. So, and of course, I was the chair of the Indian SDO, but I was the vice chair of the international SDO as well in the year 2017, and when in London the 5G standards was released in December, the first versions. So I can share some of the personal experiences of that. Now, as all of you know, that the government of India has launched several initiatives. And the central theme, I think if you really notice, the central theme of the government of India in this is all sort of the innovations, which the government would drive many of these programs to take off. Either it is Digital India and Make in India. Of course, I am personally involved with both these initiatives of the government of India. I'm not so much involved with the other initiatives, particularly in the agri sectors and also in the financial inclusions. But I think, as you will see, that we have really made some very significant innovative programs that the government has launched. On the other hand, if you look at what is the current Indian scenario in terms of trade balance, it continues to be very bleak. This is a sector-wise exports, and if you look at really the exports of the telecom products, and as I said, I will focus more on the telecom products because I know we are exporting about 3 to 4 billion US dollars, and largely that is the software, and which is application level software. So it's really very less innovations. And I'll just give you the second slide. If you look at India's electronic demands, then in the last 3 years it has been growing exponentially at 22 to 25% every year. And by the way, this is the similar story in the automobile sectors as well. The demand is really growing pretty fast. 30% of this continues to be semiconductor components, and this seems to be like the market size. Currently, for example, in 2018, we are touching almost 200 billion US dollars. And at current production level, only 5% of the demand is met internally. 95% is all import, and it is expected that if this growth continues, then the electronics import bill will outstrip the oil import bill by 2020. So this is clearly, I didn't give emphasize on the oil imports, but you can say that the entire electronic segments can really be, unless we take some significant steps in this direction. And of course, the government of India launched the Make in India program, but I just want to highlight and make the differences that what really, because most of the time the Make in India means that you set up manufacturing plants in the country, and that's where I want to share about my personal experiences that what is the difference between the manufacturing in India and to really bridge this gap, and that is where you will have the role of innovations. So I just want to give you one example of an iPhone. So this was published in Time magazine in I think this should be 2016. This is not a May 2011. This is a 2016 Time magazine. So this tells you that in a $500 iPhone, where all the money is going. Okay, so you can say $61 is going to Japan, $7 only is going to China, which is manufacturing the phone, right? $48 of course unspecified. South Korea $23 because and I will just tell you that South Korea is mostly holding currently a lot of patents in the 4G, and in the 5G they are almost holding 20% of that size of the patent. So $23 is going to South Korea, $30 to Japan, and if you really see the Apple, because of its all design and innovation, is making a cool profit of $321 out of a $500 iPhone. And I'll just give you, another telecom company is like a Qualcomm. Qualcomm has this year, for example, they have a revenue of close to 25 to 30 billion US dollars, and out of which they have an operating profit of 2 billion US dollars. And if you compare to a company like Foxconn, which manufactures phones like iPhones, and by the way, Qualcomm has 30,000 employees all over the world. So they just have 30,000 employees all over the world, does not own any manufacturing plant, but have a revenue of 25 billion US dollars and make a net profit of 2 billion US dollars. On the other hand, consider a company like Foxconn, which is into the manufacturing, has about 1 lakh employees all over the world, has a revenue of 100 billion US dollars, and also made an operating profit of 2 billion US dollars. So they made 2% profit, and because they're mostly focusing on the manufacturing the phones, so on the other hand, Qualcomm was making money just on IPRs and innovations, almost 15 to 20% of their total revenue. So I think that is also another example that I sort of wanted to say that what is the role of IPR innovations? You don't really need to just focus on the manufacturing, but also there is a lot of innovations behind the manufacturing. Now, if you look at the global IPR scenario, and nations are increasingly aware of IPR, and I think unfortunately we are really not focusing much on that. And you should look at in fact, only recently, if you know that the government of India came out with an IPR policy framework, okay? But the nations are actually using IPR reserves to position their trade policy. And in the case of telecom, I can tell you that China is really a very good example. They are, I have seen, like as a personal experience, that in the 5G, for example, they are really driving the next generation wireless standards. Now, currently, for example, if you look at the 2G or the 3G era, almost 90% of the IPR was held by the Western world, that is in the Europe and the US. And this focus is clearly now shifted in LTE, which is 4G. Almost 40% is held by the Asia Pacific region. And the Asia Pacific region means, China, Korea, and Japan. Unfortunately, we don't figure anywhere. Okay, 40% of the 4G IPRs is now, lying in the Asian subcontinent, but not, in the 2G or the 3G era. And this is really, I would say that this is not accident. This is done with a very concerted, government backed up policies, which are, really done at the top level, and there is really a concerted efforts to make sure that these ideas and innovations are pushed into the global standards, so that all products which are manufactured, which conforms to these global standards, these companies and these nations really earn their revenues out of the royalties which are being paid on licensing these innovations. So this is a real well thought out policy. These are not just accidents that in the 4G now we are having the IPRs. So what I wanted to say is that there are really two critical elements for Make in India, and one is design of IPR generations, and another one is the manufacturing. And often when we say Make in India, we are mistaken it to be just a manufacturing. We really need to focus on the design and IPR creations. That is really the most important and the most critical part of a Make in India program. And that is where I will articulate that what is really the role of academia, particularly the institutes of national importance that can play a significant role in the present context. Let's look at, so before we come to this, let's look at the engineering educations in the country. As all of you know, there are about 6,000 plus engineering institutes in the country, and about 2.5 million people enroll, but it is estimated that about 1.5 million graduates are coming out of these engineering institutes. And what has led to this, and what is the employment market in the country? While there has been a significant change in the employment opportunities in the last 10 to 15 years, mostly it has been towards the creation of a service industry where most of these engineering graduates have been employed. And the way in which it has been worked is that most of them, when they have been hired by the service industry, they have been internally trained by these companies, and then those talents have become productive in the country. And as a result, while it has led to the creation of a large service industry, and as I already pointed out, that a significant portion of our export is coming out of our service industry, and largely the engineering graduates out of these institutions are being productively employed. However, what is the difficulty? That we have a very little ownership of the IPR. While there are almost all companies which own the IPRs have their design centers in the country, almost all, not only in the telecom sectors, but also in all other sectors. The multinational corporations are having their design centers in here, and where the Indian engineering graduates are working, we are not having the ownership of the IPR, and the ownership of the IPR is clearly held by their parent companies, and as a result, we are not getting the advantage of exploiting these IPRs for our economic growth or for positioning our trade policies. Now, if you look at the value add of the product industry, and if you look at what are the components of a product, then of course, as I pointed out, that design, development and IPR is a significant percentage, and I gave you an iPhone example where it constitutes almost 50 to 60% of the thing. Components industry, it is very weak in India, except maybe in automobile sector. Certainly in the electronic sectors, there is no component industry. Almost all VLSI chipsets and integrated circuits have to be imported. We cannot really make any indigenous product here without importing the hardware component. Manufacturing and assembly, as I said, in the last 5 years or so, because of the government thrust, there has been some upsurge in the auto industry and telecom industry. We have seen some growth. We have some mobile phone manufacturing plants. We have some base stations manufacturing plants. We of course have some auto industry manufacturing as well. So I think there is some movement there, but clearly I think we have great weaknesses in terms of design development and IPR creations and components in order to be a globally competitive industry. And this also is reflected in some other way. And why there is, so this is just an analysis, why this is happening. So one thing is, so this gives you how much the total number of patents filed in all disciplines. It's not just the telecommunications. It's in all disciplines all over the world. And this is like as a world intellectual property indicators. And as you can see that in 2017, and particularly you will see this upsurge in the last 5 years. China has been filing the patents all over the world in very, very large numbers. This is what you can see, and of course followed by the US. And in India, we are having a very negligible number of IPRs which are getting filed. Particularly, very less patents are also filed in the US.
And this data is corresponds to India or the US patents?
No, this is patents filed all over the world, having a world rights. So this is total number of patents filed by the company from that countries. Now there are 4 problems here. One is, of course, we are generating very few innovations and very few ideas. So there is a lack of research there. The second one is that there is not much contributions to global standardization effort. I think this is very important, and I can tell you that in the electronic sectors, this is the important thing. In the sense that most of the products are made conforming to a standard, and when the products are made conforming to a standard, then the royalties are earned by the royalty holders whose ideas have gone into the standards. And therefore, all over the world, there are these standardization bodies, and there is already an effort to get your idea into the global standards. There is very little in the Indian context. Then there is very little interactions between the academia and the industry. So this is really a great problem in the country. And of course, there are a small number of Indian product companies. And of course, all of them are intrinsically linked. These are not in isolation. Because there is a very little interactions between the academia and industry, we have very few IPRs and patents, and that is why we don't have a contribution to global standards effects, and that is why we have a very small number of Indian product companies. I mean, I'll just give you one example. We have a very large phone market in the country. We have about 1 billion plus cell phone subscribers, and every 2 years people are changing their phones. So one could ask this question that, and I told you that $200 billion worth telecom equipments are imported. So why should I be setting up a startup company here? And with that motivation only I set this up, that company. That even if I get, a 1% market share of that $200 billion, it will be $2 billion. That is more than enough, for the company to become big. So why there are not companies? Why we are not having a product company which will make a base station or a phone? And the answer is very simple. That if I make a company which will manufacture a base station or a phone, then I will have to shell out a large percentage of my income as a royalty to the people who are holding the IPRs. And since I don't have any IPR, there will be no way for me to bargain the reverse IPR, and therefore it will be only one way. And as a result, if I set up a company, any telecom company, that can never become a profitable venture in the country and can never become globally competitive with companies like Samsungs and iPhones and so on, because I just don't own any IPR. What happens in this IPR world is that Samsung holds certain IPRs, Apple holds certain IPRs, Qualcomm holds certain IPRs. They really cross-license each other without any money. Okay, and as a result, you know, all these product companies essentially coexist. This is simply not possible to have here. Very, very, almost impossible to have an Indian product company unless you make contributions and have your IPR, take it to a global standard where you will have an opportunity to do IPR bargaining with the other companies, and that is simply doesn't exist. So since this is not there, this is not there, and since this is not there, there is very little interaction. But since there is very little interactions between the academia and the industry, we are not able to have a very vibrant startup ecosystem, and that also is because of very few IPRs and patents. So in that sense, you know, this is really very intrinsically linked, and that is where, you know, we really need to find out that what we can do. It's not that, you know, the India has not done anything in the product space. We had large number of national R&D labs, starting from the ISRO and the DRDO and the CSIR labs. In the C-DOT, in fact, the C-DOT in the 80s really started with that motivation in the telecom space, and the CDAT, for example, in the supercomputing space. And of course, we had the public sector manufacturing industry as well, in the form of ECIL, Bharat Electronics Limited, BHEL. So what has really gone wrong? I mean, why we have not really reached to this stage? And partly because very little focus on generating the IPRs, patents, taking it to the global standardization efforts, and not having a very strong academia industry interactions. We were not successful in leveraging, you know, some of these efforts which were launched in the country, particularly in the area of space, defense, telecom, and, you know, other manufacturings. In fact, if you look at the history of other nations, many of these programs have spun off companies and have offshoots of these which have successfully led to IPR creations and product companies. Unfortunately, you know, we really could not leverage these efforts, and largely they remained closed government programs leading to some specific objectives and not helping create an ecosystem of IPR driven private or corporate industry in the country. So I think that's really you know, one of the sort of weaknesses of the country. Now, what is the role of academia? Now, what happens given the scenario that exists today, that we have very few startups and we don't have such a strong ecosystem of product companies, academia has a great role to play. Now, usually, if you see in the global scale, that the participation in the standardizations is mostly done by the companies and the industry. There is very little participation by the academia, or almost nil participation. Okay, the product companies are also, you know, is really the work of the industry. You know, it's not like academics are really forming the company. But really, what is happening is that because of the strong linkages and the ecosystem that exists, academia really feeds it into both the standardization efforts, the IPR creations, and the product companies. Now, given the fact that, as I said, that this is very intrinsically linked, and we have to make some certain beginning, I feel that, you know, academia has a great role and responsibility in the country than in other countries, I would say. So what is role of Indian academia? Really speaking, the Indian academia needs to play the role in the 3 ways. One is IPR creation and innovations. Another one is in the participation in the standards development. And third one, of course, is the incubating startups. Now, this needs to be done in a coordinated fashion. Often, you know, the interaction between them is not fully understood. We are, while having a large number of startup ecosystem, okay, without understanding and without having a proper strategy for IPR creation and innovation and taking that IPR to the global standards, we cannot have a very strong ecosystem which will replicate the ecosystem that has happened in other countries. I can definitely say that in the telecom sectors, it is impossible to have a startup which will be successful unless you have made a mark in the global telecom standards and have got IPRs which have been pushed into those standards. It will be almost impossible to have any startup reaching anything like Ericsson's or Huawei or Samsung of the world or Cisco. I mean, we just cannot reach there just because of $1 billion investments or anything like that. Now that said, we have the innovation environment is really like a triple helix. So the industry, academia and government are really tightly coupled. The academia and particularly the institutes that all of us are from can really play a great role in generating new ideas and trained manpowers. And as I said, there has to be an emphasis on the research which sort of leads to translations and leads to IPR creations. The government, of course, needs to create and sustain this ecosystem, and particularly the components ecosystem. And industry, of course, has a role to take these ideas into products and processes. There are many initiatives that have come up, and I will touch briefly upon them. There are these centers of excellence, incubators which are getting set up. Then, of course, there are these technology centers and research parks. There are these research and convergence labs, and of course, there are many technology networks, platforms which have come up, which really starting to create an environment of innovations. And as you know, that we need to, of course, begin small. Even big companies were always small earlier, and the innovative companies are really the drivers of the economic growth. And so it is really very important to understand that we need to have the strong linkages between the industry, academia, and a very strategic policy support from the government. So far, I think, as we said, that academias have been focusing mostly on the publications. That has been always, one of the most important metrics. But I said the focus really needs to shift to generating the IPR, which also results in patents and trade secrets. And the next step would be, of course, that apply these intellectual properties to innovative products and processes. And we need to emphasize, therefore, these translational routes for academic research. That is, either we incubate the startup companies or we partner with the companies. Now, there are certain recommendations, and I will throw open this on for discussion. Of course, we have been doing this. I think there are many government schemes. We can leverage these to strengthen the in-house incubator. One of the other recommendation is that we can have an in-house bridge funding schemes. In fact, we took that step in IIT Kanpur. And there is also a need to have a conflict avoidance policies for academics. I mean, this is very, very important that we need to avoid the conflicts between the incubation work, manpower, and the normal academics. We are so all these things, particularly the building an in-house teams, reward industry engagement, have an ecosystem of these things, is also linked to setting up the technology research park, and I will just briefly touch on that. The concept of research park, which we said, actually allows the faculty members to interact with the companies for submitting, let us say, a joint R&D proposals, and this could also be used to reward the industry engagement. In fact, IIT Kanpur took some steps in the sense that we will now incentivize commercializing the IPRs generated out of the IIT Kanpur faculty members, which is now has been approved by the IIT Kanpur BOG also. So that can be, for example, factored at the time of promotions. This could be sort of one of the factors as well. As you know that, as I said, publications are already encouraged, but we also need to sensitize the value of IP protections. And there is, of course, a need for faculty for basic assessment of potential for industry applications. So I think this is also, we need to really create a pipeline where the basic research which is getting done in the labs is really not an end goal in itself, where you publish the papers and forget about it, but also need to see that how that can be harnessed its potential for the industry applications. We can, of course, in this direction sensitize the faculty to patenting before publications when such assessment is really positive. And the sensitization about trade secrets is almost sort of nil in the Indian academia, and also that is also required to be emphasized. The other problem that exists in the country, particularly in the Indian academia, is about two things. So, about IPR protections and about engaging with the industry for joint ownership of the IPR. Okay, and I know, I mean, even in IIT Kanpur and earlier in IIT Bombay as well, that many of the times the IPR policies are really discouraging for the industry. And we need to be more friendly when it is internally incubated startup companies, but we also need to be balanced for the industry partners. We are not at a stage where we can dictate terms, so therefore we definitely would like to be at a stage where we can dictate terms, but I'm just suggesting that we need to go to that level. Now, as I said, that we need to have a proactive policy for rewards, particularly the high impact patents, which is routinely done in the industry. The potential ideas impacts is almost routinely assessed even before filing a patent, and we need to also have mechanisms for impact assessment at the institute level, which is almost non-existent in the Indian academy. These are very, very broad level recommendations for managing the innovations. Now, I touched upon what could be done. I want to sort of harness the importance of standardization, and I'll share my personal experience in this. So, in India, as I said, so I want to highlight this point, that till 3-4 years back, we were the only country in the top telecom market which did not have a telecom standards development organization. We were the only country. All 22 countries which are players in the telecom world, all of them have global telecom standards development organizations. And as a result, what happened? I'll just tell you that what was the impact of that. In the global standards bodies like TEPP and all, which standardizes the 3G and 4G, only the national SDOs, you can participate only through national SDOs. Like for example, and in fact this is not true just in the telecom, this is also true in many sectors where the nations are represented through their national SDOs, and in the telecom world, India really did not have. And we had been really championing this with the government of India that we should set up a telecom standards development organization. And here is this thing that there is a lot of role for the academia to make changes and influences the standards bodies. There are many barriers to standardizations. For example, in the country, mostly we are having, as I already said, that service or applications oriented innovations. There is also a lack of awareness, like there is a lack of awareness about innovations. There is clearly a lack of awareness in our education about standards based sort of education. People are really not aware of the global standards. There are of course financial aspect, because participating in these standards bodies do require money, and we also have a lack of long-term planning and foresight in this, because often policies change with the changes in the government as well. So this is what we championed this. I, and along with other colleagues from other IITs, we have now set up this Telecom Standards Development Organization, which was set up in 2014, and we are there now. In fact, we can now take our IPRs to global wireless standards or a global telecommunication standards, and take it to the next generation. So this is something clearly we are able to make a significant difference. And I will just highlight one important achievement of FDSDSI. So when the 5G standards were made in the first phone, soon all of you will have a 5G phone in 2020. In the 5G, there are three things. So 5G, basically what is 5G? So the Western, almost other world are thinking that 5G means you need to stream the YouTube when you are sitting in the bullet train. So the 5G specifications are something like 300 kilometers per hour or 250 kilometers per hour. I should get 200 megabits per second. That's really the goal. Okay. And we said we are having what is our India's requirement on the other hand? India's requirement is that when you are sitting here or when you are walking, you should get a good internet access on the mobile. Okay, and so this was not really appreciated in the global standard. Now, of course, you can argue that a phone which works at 250 kilometers per hour and gives you 200 megabits per second will also give you 200 megabits per second when you are stationary, right? Because, but at what cost? The cost will be a significant energy efficiency, at the cost of energy efficiency. A system which is optimized to work at 250 kilometers per hour has certain energy efficiency. That system, if it is made to work when you are stationary, will be heavily energy inefficient. And however, energy efficiency so there is another difference. Energy efficiency for the cell phone is a great concern for the Western world, because, and obviously for us as well, that batteries should last for a long time. But energy efficiency of the base station is never a concern for them, because base stations are almost always on the electric grid, and there is 24/7 uninterrupted power supply. So it could be energy efficient if it was consuming 1 kilowatt. Then it could consume 2 kilowatt. It doesn't matter, for them. But it is a great concern for us, because 80% of our telecom towers are running on the diesel generator sets. So we cannot be having this. So we need to change the definitions. And we were successfully able to push this in IMP 2020, which is the official name of 5G. Now we have an Indian requirement which has been pushed into, which is called LMLC, Low Mobility Large Cell Scenario. And this is really one of the objectives of this lecture. Of course, now innovations are being created that how to make that system energy efficient when you are stationary and so on. Large number of IPRs have been filed. We have been able to make a small dent. I would say that we don't hold 10% of IPR, but India will hold 1 to 2% of IPRs. And this will come only from academia. IT Bombay, when I was there, IT Hyderabad and IT Madras. Okay. Now there are some what is called as standards essential patents, SEPs. We will hold some SEPs in these standards. Okay. But primarily they are coming from academia because we yet do not have, as I said, the product companies which can really take it to the global telecom standards. But we have now a platform, and that platform needs to be really successfully leveraged and exploited by the other academic institutions. And this is what I just said. So I will stop here, and now we can throw open the floor for discussion. So I was also instrumental in initiating the research park activities at IIT Bombay. So I have a small slide on the what could be the model for the research park and how actually we can translate this. So I think we can have a.
What are exactly these standard essential patents, SEPs?
Okay, so standard essential patents are the patents which have become part of the standard. So you hold certain patent and your ideas have now gone into the standard. Then what happens is that everyone, so it's like this, if your idea has gone into 5G standard, then anyone wanting to make a 5G phone will have to give a royalty to you. Okay. So anyone in the world, every 5G phone sold, you will get a royalty. So, and it is there not only in the telecom sector but almost in all sectors, because that is where the whole effort is. Wherever things are standardized, if your idea has gone into the standard, then for every product that is getting manufactured conforming to the standard, it will hold a royalty. So that is what is called as SEPs, Standards Essential Patents. Now what happens is that most of the time when you are making a product, you will need someone else's ideas as well, right? But if you hold certain SEPs, then you will negotiate with all SEP holders. You will give your SEP free, and you will get other people's SEP also free, so you can make a product. Okay, but if you want to make a product and if you don't hold any SEP, then you will have to give royalties to everyone.
Sir, I have one more question. Sir, filing the patent and getting granting of the patent, it's a long process, very frustrating.
Not really.
Not really.
Why is that?
It takes minimum 5 to 6 years.
That is for granting, but filing you can do immediately.
Filing we can do, but we have to wait.
No, actually I will just tell you that granting also differs. So I am holding some 28 patents, some 7 or 8 or US patents, and some of them have been granted like within 1 year, and some have taken 6 years, as you said. So this really varies because of who is the patent examiner and who is your lawyer and what is the motivation. So it's a factor of that. But once you file a patent and the patent application is published, then it is it's your idea. Then anyone copying that will be really violation of the guidelines.
If industries actually, we realize that IPRs are contributing to a good lot of revenue world over. So in Indian industry, which is basically having all the facilities with them, good R&D facilities and product manufacturing facilities and all. I know that Indian academia has certain limitations because we have to incubate and we have to generate an idea, incubate. It takes a bit of time. So now, having known that there is a whole lot of revenue market in that IPR, why industry is not coming forward from that side, right? This is number one. And number two, as you say that when I germinate an idea, what happens is it's only on paper first, and then maybe I model next. Then when it comes to really product academia and the industry taking this idea, I know I'm moving it to the incubation. What I say is basically the incubation and the idea processing has to go hand in hand actually. So how do you actually say, how do we achieve this actually?
So I think you have rightly said, and I also sort of pointed out that this is really an issue in the country, that we have a very weak linkages of academia and industry, and we also do not have a very strong strategic support at the government level to take this to the next level, while other governments, like let's say the Chinese government or the Korean governments, really pushed for it. So, so it is true that we have a weak linkages between the academia and the industry. But what I said is that we need to take certain proactive steps towards that directions with a clear strategy for that. And the Indian academia, and particularly the institutions like IITs and NITs and IIITs, have a large role to play in these directions. So, because somewhere it has to have a beginning. We don't have a very vibrant, large number of startups who are products and innovations or IPR driven, and or a very vibrant product industry, which is which can sort of interact with the academia. So some beginning has to be made, and in this case, the beginning can only be made by the academia, in the sense that we only need to make, and that is where I suggested certain recommendations, that we need to make a mindset change. In a large scale mindset change, really, to make a beginning in the global standardization effort. So I will just give you like an example of a global standardization effort. Let's say a 5G standard. People from the US universities or European universities are not attending those meetings. Professors are not attending those meetings. But we have started attending. I like for example in 2016-17 I would have attended some 10-12 standards bodies meetings, and professors from IIT Hyderabad and IIT Madras also have attended. So, but in all other, if you see the delegations of all other countries, they are all industry people. They are not. No professor is attending.
Same is the scenario elsewhere, abroad also.
Yes, so that's what I'm saying. No, I'm talking of the global standards bodies also, where professors are not. So there are no professors coming from the US universities or the European universities attending those global standards meetings. But what I'm saying is that who can now do it from the India? Since we do not have the product companies in that space, since we do not have an industry attending, we need to make sort of a beginning. Okay? And that is where I'm saying that we have a much larger role here to play than in the rest of the world. So we need to do that. And of course, once we reach a threshold, then it can be handed off, and we will have an ecosystem where that is creating. Now, answer to the question why industry is not coming, as I said, that the same question is asked by the industry, that why academia is not coming up, and we are still caught in that. And that is the reason I said in the terms of my prescriptions for some of the clinical prescriptions, if I may say so, that we also need to sort of make a changes in our IPR policies, our innovations policies, structural changes, let us say, to encourage interactions with the industry, and also have a industry friendly policies which will encourage them to sort of break that barrier and come. And of course, once we reach a stage, then we can dictate terms that that whether we want to do or not. Yes.
Sir, I really thank you for opening our eyes, particularly with $200 billion statement. I wish and I request you that don't you feel that this IPR issues be brought into curricula at a much younger age, where we can directly, some of the people will directly, like even in schools for that purpose, high school and all, if we start and just intimate them that here is a space where a lot of employment and wealth is available if we have some creative ideas.
Yes, of course we can go down, but we need to first make it at engineering institute level first,
yeah,
where there is almost
Second one, sir, corollary to that, in engineering curricula it should be compulsory component of our curriculum at the BTech level, maybe first year onwards. Maybe first year would be the right space.
Yeah. So I have already articulated that there is sort of very less understanding of standards and IPRs and innovations and
how it is related to wealth creation.
yes, and its importance on the wealth creation. There is almost nil or no understanding, and we can do that something. Actually, IIT Bombay did that. IIT Bombay has a minor program in innovations and entrepreneurships, which students of the BTechs and the masters are also doing this at the first year level. They can do a minor in innovations and entrepreneurships, which some of these things
It will pay off. It will pay off in some way.
So there was this bar chart which you showed.
Yeah.
And I found that the patents filed in Germany is more or less comparable with India. So do you have any comments on that, being developing and developed countries?
Actually, okay. So I was shown, actually if you go to that link which is given, World Intellectual Property Indicator, that will tell you the full story. If you see in, I made a, I want to make some off the record statement, because if you really see, right, there is a strategic move by the China-Korea nexus in the Japan government, and this is at the strategic government level. Okay, so if you see in the last 5 years, the innovations and the IPRs in some of these companies actually going down in these countries. It is really like so the Asia Pacific thinks that the next century will be theirs, and this is really this is not, as I said, accidental, but this also speaks of the economy of the nations. So that is where I'm saying that this is reflective of that. So I mean, this should not be taken lightly. I think so. It is not just that it happened that there is a very, very concerted efforts at the government level to sort of penetrate into this. And I think we should be worried because we are in the Asia Pacific part, and we will be the biggest sort of affected party in this.
That is the urgency. Then why industry is silent? That is the urgency. Why industry is not coming forward? Why
Maybe these are my views, by the way. Maybe these are not shared. I'm not saying that this is the truth. These are my views.
IPR is generating a lot of revenue. That is
So I'm just making some factual statements and some of my own personal views. Maybe these are, in fact, when the government emphasized on the Make in India, most of the efforts were to get manufacturing in the country. And a lot of efforts were made. We were doing Foxconn, we had all these mobile phone manufacturing plant. And there the government was thinking in the following way, that if we have this manufacturing plant, then that creates employment for the youths and large populations which we have. And that also reduces the cost of the equipment which is available to the masses, and that's why that emphasis on the Make in India. But I feel that a larger focus was left. I mean, if you just compare a Foxconn and a Qualcomm, it's a $100 billion company. Their operating net income is 2%, and there's another company which is just having a revenue of 30%, but operating income of 15 to 20%. So that aspect is sort of missing. If we bring this, then of course we need employment. So we need large manufacturing here also, because we have a large manpower. which is unemployed, and we need to creatively employ them. So we do need the manufacturing sector to grow. But what I'm saying is that a manufacturing sector to grow without IPR and innovations will be a strategic mistake for the country in the next 50 years, is what.
Sir, to further supplement the discussion, in India, industrial sector, I can say pharma companies has come forward.
Yes.
Many pharma companies have started gathering together and creating own incubators.
Yes.
Forgetting about government and academia, they have their own incubators now. And second sector is the agri sector, which has started a big way exports.
Yes, yes. So I think we have made. So what I'm emphasizing now here is that particularly in the what happens is that in the pharma and the IT engineering institutes have a bit little role to play, although we have very important components even in IT Kanpur in these areas. But I think in the other sectors like automobile or electronics or defense, we have a much significantly direct and significant role to play, and also manufacturing. And if these are really embedded in the innovations, then I think we can really do a much better in terms of the economic growth.
Professor, I would like to of course your talk is making a really good statement. The information revolution, research, innovation, that has really come out with the speed technology, 2G, 3G, 4G, all these things have come and have also created a lot of business wars, even in the group of families, lions and this thing, and the unison of brothers, boom of the stock market, partition of these brothers, make the market sell down. But anyway, I'm afraid that do we have the prioritization regard to these technologies?
Yeah. So I don't want to go into the business or that we keep on going. And I think I just wanted to also emphasize this. If you look at Dr. Karandikar talk, then he also said that in terms of our R&D spending in the GDP, while it looks small, but we are also spending significantly. Like, for example, but we are very poor. For example, when you compare to Israel and Korea, and although China is now spending a significant fraction of the GDP for the R&D. So I think we have raised this question that that we are lacking in terms of priority and also the strategy. And here is one I have articulated. And so primarily, this is what really I articulated. You can say that my talk.
My second part of my question was, I was about to drag it to that. Suppose if the same technology was available with the leaders available in those days, like Patel and Nehruji, country would have been somewhat upside down. But the technology with the speed available today, but only to talk among the criminals who are already in prison jails, how to escape from jails.
That's a political question.
No. I think what you are saying is that
and cultural innovations, it has opened a lot of Pandora's box related problems.
No, those issues are definitely there. I'm not. Those are the philosophical questions of a technology evolutions. Those remain. I'm just currently emphasizing on how we can leverage the technology evolutions for the economic prosperity of the nation, and what role the academia can play in that. There are other larger questions of managing the philosophical questions of managing the usages of the technology. Those are like different.
Sir, I want to know more about some specific details about entrepreneurship or innovation policy for your faculty.
Of IIT Kanpur?
Yes. Do they share some equity or what? Some insights?
Okay. So, I can talk about both IIT Kanpur as well as IIT Bombay. So faculty members here are allowed to start companies officially. That's a board approved policy. Of course, they have to come through our incubator. They have to take permission So you need to make declarations. If you start a company without declarations, it is illegal, and then of course you can be hurt. So you can then incubator takes a certain equity in the company.
Like typically 20% or
That varies from 8%.
For faculty, it's 10 plus 3, 13%.
Yes, 13%. That is very low in, but that is different policy in IT Bombay. So what IT Bombay does is that is only the incubator takes equity only for the space which is provided. But for the IPR that is generated, you need to sign a separate agreement with the Office of the Lead R&D. And for that, you may take an equity or you may sign up a licensing agreement.
so when the CATI has to take leave or it can during
So we recently approved a policy which is just very recently in IT Kanpur, where faculty members can be given sabbatical up to 2 years for incubating their companies. This policy existed in IT Bombay for a long time, and I used it. I was on sabbatical when we founded company long back in 2003.
So it's not possible. Sorry, is it not possible that the CATI can do both the things, starting company as well as doing teaching as such?
No, that is so actually what happens is that so there are two things here. One thing is that if you are in an idea stage or in a pre-incubation stage, etc., then of course you are trying out that idea in the lab, etc. But if you have to launch it as a commercial venture, then you need to be full-time working. Otherwise, that will not become successful. You cannot be working there half-hearted. But of course, once it takes off, then you can join back and be consultant or advisor or on the board of the company. That is possible. And then of course you could do like a and IIT's policies are generally very friendly for playing consulting roles, etc. So then you can be a formal consultant to that or an advisor or whatever. And then that company may have a full-time CTO and CTOs and all, and you can do that. So that is possible.
Thank you.
Sir, we have some different pattern in our university.
Yes.
State Agriculture University, the department or HOD himself becomes the manufacturer. For example, I am having one brand, Anubhav Liquid Biofertilizers. I am manufacturer. I am acting as a CEO in that, but acting as a head of the department for teaching and research. So research outcome of my department, I am launching one by one products from the university. And in that, initially university give us some seed money to start the company, under the brand name of university only. And we have such a seed company, we have animal mineral mixture company. So with the colleges and the departments, now we are starting manufacturing unit and selling directly to the end user, not through dealer distributor.
No. So are you selling it through a company or you are selling it through a? I mean, is there a company?
So no, we are creating a brand name of the university, manufacturing unit within the campus. Products
See,
are
I have
within the campus and
some.
selling.
So I have some problems here. So actually, what we have done in both, most IITs, I know of IT Madras, IT Bombay, and IT Kanpur, that we have a separate not-for-profit company, which is actually managing all these incubating companies. But these incubating companies, which are actually developing the product and selling, they are for-profit private companies, and therefore they come under all the taxation regimes of various tax, including income tax, GST, and all other taxation. I'm not sure of university and also excise and other thing. University is selling a product directly. If I take the case of IIT as an example, IIT can transfer the technology to a company and get a royalty or an income from the technology transfer. But IIT cannot be manufacturing the products and selling it, because for that, you need to pay certain taxes and all, and that will be counted as an income. And IITs by charter are registered as educational institutes and therefore exempt from all such taxes, and they are not allowed to earn incomes like this.
No sir, we are maintaining both the portfolio.
So that is
So as a CEO, I have to have a manufacturing license on my name. I have to have a sale license, wholesale license, retail license.
Yes, yes.
And I have to maintain both the accounts separate.
No, so that is done. I mean, that is what is done even in IITs when the.
Many universities, agriculture, now this has been started across the country. Since 10 years I have that manufacturing unit.
Yeah, so I think that is what it is.
On about 3.5 crore out of that.
So I think this is what is needed, and maybe this is what is needed at a.
Sir, here licensing also. Here license the technology. So it is non-exclusive licensing across the state, across the country. Now we are going abroad also.
Will the faculty get something out of it? Will the faculty get something out of it? Earnings, the faculty will also get some share?
No, but the money invested by the so I can use for my R&D, for my department development.
Not the cash.
Yes,
we
no cash.
can take the discussion in the afternoon when we are actually having an open discussion on it. If you have specific question, please.
So, my question is about the incubation center itself. Attracting and retaining incubatees. Some comparison of experience, IIT Bombay and IIT Kanpur, IIT Bombay being a metro and Kanpur being a tier 2 city. I am asking this question because in IIT Trichy we have an incubation center, in fact I am part of it, but retaining incubatees within Trichy is a challenge. I just wanted to compare it to those.
So when so before I joined as the director of IIT Kanpur, I used to have in the same way that IIT Bombay incubator is doing great, and no other IIT incubator can match that because of the city of Mumbai. But actually, it is not true. As Professor Pani mentioned earlier, that IIT Kanpur is having one of the largest incubator ecosystem, and that is actually not an exaggeration. It is really true. And now, what is the role of an incubator? As I pointed out, that the role of an incubator, as you said, that you want to retain the companies. As a matter of fact, incubators should not be retaining the companies for a long time. Okay. So the incubator companies, as the name suggests, it's an incubator. So they have to be there really till they are incubated, and then they need to go out into the world. So the idea is that till it comes to a prototype stage and we get the funding, there is a strong interactions and requirements of working with the institute, and if there is a value add and an IPR coming from the institute, obviously the company would like to coexist on the campus itself, and it doesn't matter whether it is Trichy or Kanpur or Guwahati or Mumbai or Bangalore. Once they go out, then of course these companies can start their operations wherever they wish, in Bangalore, Mumbai, Pune, Hyderabad. It doesn't matter, they don't have to be on the, so once they graduate, so it really doesn't matter whether it is Mumbai or Kanpur, it really matters that what is your ecosystem and what is the value addition that the institute will offer. And when we are setting up an incubator, obviously we believe that the incubating companies should be exploiting the IPRs and technology which is getting developed in the institute. And that is where, if there are interesting ideas and technologies and IPRs which are getting developed in the institute by faculty and students, then I think there is no problem. Those companies can, for the incubation period, can exist on any campus. It doesn't really sort of matter.
Sir, we all have realized that going for IPR is very important, especially in our academy. Knowing this fact, still we do research, and for the research we take the help of the students who are doing PhD, and they are in hurry to get their PhD degree most of the time, and they want to publish the paper and take the degree. So there is not actual thinking in that line that this research could be converted into IPR. There could be potential in the research, definitely. So how to change that mindset?
So I think my whole talk was sort of based on that we need to change the mindset, we need to change the policies, and we need to factor have programs, as I said, maybe we start at minor innovations and alternatives. So this requires interventions at the policy level, at the awareness and the education level, and also, factoring it into rewards and evaluation schemes. So we need actually at all levels, and then probably these changes can be done.
So
We have time for only couple of questions. After the
supplements.
Normally, what is the
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Just a simple question. Normally, what is the period of incubation?
What is the period of incubation? We have a minimum is 2 years, 3 years, right? 3 years.
2 plus 1.
2 plus 1.
That's the important word you spoken is mindset change. First, we teachers should have our mindset change. When a student comes to us for PhD, we have to say, go for this many important journals, search out, review the things and come with a problem. Correct? And we can start the research. Instead of that, now we have to say, search the Indian patent, search the global patent, search the US patents and come.
No, I think I would say that search for the Indian problems, and I can tell you in the telecom some 10 problems which are there which requires hard technological solutions. And I think for example, one very simple problem which is not there, which we have very I have a complete PhD thesis on that. See, what happens is the fiber optics is laid in the country. In the US, what happens is that once the fiber is laid, once in a while only there will be a fiber cut. And once the fiber cut is there, the network is down obviously. And then there are methods of restoring the networks. There are very, I would say, very good optimization algorithms for restoration of the networks in such cases. For end-to-end restoration of the networks when a fiber cut is there. And for that, a network topology needs to be designed so that it is resilient when there is one fiber cut. Now in India, fiber cuts are every week. If you ask Indian telecom operators, and the network devices which are there, routers and switches, which have these restoration algorithms, if those cuts are happening frequent and often, the restoration quality is very poor, and I can actually give a very technical talk on that. Okay, so we really need to, and no one has thought about it also. There was no research. There is no standard also. The networks and switches really do not work on this, and very interesting approaches are there. And I don't know, some of you may know that in company, in Bangalore there is a company called Tejas Networks. In some of their products, they have very good segment protection algorithms, which will protect one segment of the end-to-end fiber optic network. So, there are many problems which actually require a very hard technology solutions. They are not. And I told you about the 5G also, that everyone used to think that okay, one which will work at 200 kilometers per hour will work at 0 kilometers per hour. So why are you worried? In India, if the speed is 40 kilometers per hour, that will work, but it will come at the cost of great energy requirements and base station energy. So what happens is that we want for our Indian requirements. So if you take a 3G base station consumes 400 watts of power. Okay, so we want that power requirement of base stations to go down sub 100 watts. Because if it is sub 100 watts, then only the solar panels will become feasible and viable. With 500, 600 watts, you will require a large footprint for the solar panels. So you need less than 100 watts. Less than 100 watts energy requirement of base station is not the requirement of US. Yes, cell phone battery should last for 36 hours is definitely the requirement, and also the requirement of India. So some requirements may be common, but some requirements are very unique here.
We have time for one last question.
Sir, why solar power is not being used for the powering the towers actually?
No, I told you that because 3G base stations requires about 300 300. No, we will need large footprint. So this cannot be put on the tower, on the telecom tower. We have to really need a roof. And number one, number two is that there is this comparison between the cost of the solar panel versus the diesel generator. So, I mean, this study has been done. So, if the power outages is let's say more than 6 hours or 8 hours, then solar will become expensive. If it is sort of less than 6 hours or something,
Can
then
I add something?
Yes.
Regarding your problem, we have algorithm, standard algorithm available for network reconfiguration, circuit reconfiguration with multiple objectives. These are standards available algorithms.
yes,
So why don't we use all those algorithms in your telecom sector?
they are used. They are used, of course. They are definitely used in the.
So thank you, Professor Karandikar. It was really, really great.